Welcome to this lesson on Unity. This is our tweaking the project lesson. We're going to get artistic this time. Less of a technical or programming exercise than an exercise in making your project look really good. And also, we're going to learn about and practice light mapping our island. It's a great way to show shadows on your island without having to do it in real time, which is we're going to bake our light maps, which is a much more effective way to show those shadows on the scene. So first of all, let's do the artistic part. So you'll see I've got my island scene open. This is the latest version of our island scene, in which I've got the power cells laid out that I have to collect in order to get into the outpost building. But it doesn't look particularly good at the moment, so what I'm going to do is make some modifications to the island to make it look a little bit better. First thing I'd like you to do is make sure that you've got your latest version of your island scene open, the one with the power cells. And let's start by adding some trees. Now, it's likely that on your own island you already have trees. On my island, I'm starting with like the most plain looking one imaginable. Just for the sake of this tutorial, your island, of course, is going to look different. And so for the artistic portion of today's lesson, feel free to modify the steps that I'm giving you in the lesson to match what makes sense for your own island. But in my case, I've got a super flat island with no trees at all, so I'm going to go ahead and add some trees around. To do that, I'm going to select the terrain in my hierarchy, and then I'm going to select the tree creator, and I'm going to check to make sure I've got a palm tree. We used palm tree in an earlier lesson. If you don't see the palm tree in your tree creator section of the terrain in the inspector, you'll go to Edit, Trees, Add Tree, and then find the tree model that you want to use and add it to your scene. Now again, I've already got it inside in my case, and so I'm going to start adding trees. And the goal here is to sort of add trees in a way that feels natural to the island, and that will be, for example, rather than straight rows of trees, you may put them in sort of clumps where they grow a whole bunch of them in a given area, and then maybe not any for a while, then some more. It's often the case that there are sets of trees along the just inside the beach, inside the island, a kind of a tree line. In my case, I'm going to make some changes to the settings. I'm going to set my brush size down to 1. And I'm going to set the tree height and width each to 60. And the variation I'll drop down to 5. And I'll leave the tree density where it is. I'll leave it fairly high. And then I'm going to just start laying out clumps of trees around on my island. I'll use my view tools so that I can rotate around the island to get a sense of where I need to place things. And it's likely that as I go along in modifying and tweaking the layout of my island, that these trees that I'm placing now, I may end up having to move them later on, delete some and add some in. So, but just quickly here, I'm going to add in a clump of them sort of all the way around the island. Make a tree line, and I'll add a few little clumps of them here and there. So spend some time on your own. I'm just doing a super quick version of this to put some trees around here and there. And as you're doing this, be sure to go in and hit play from time to time to look around and see what the layout is as you're making these tweaks to your island. Yours is boundless time that you may have is going to help your island look better than what mine is looking like when I have just a few seconds. So that's a way to add some trees really quickly, and again, you'll probably modify it as you make other changes to the island. Let's move ahead, though, and make some other tweaks to the island by going for a more natural-looking terrain. Now, on your own island, you may have spent a lot of time doing this. I'm going from a real basic version here just to give a demonstration. So, of course, again, you're going to make your own modifications to what I'm describing here. In my case, though, I'm going to select the Raise and Lower Terrain tool, and I'm going to set my brush size to 35. And I'm going to I'll choose this fairly small roundish brush. I'll start playing around with some different styles too. And I'm going to set the opacity really low here. And the goal here is to go around and create some interesting hills and mini valleys or sort of little holes and troughs around the island. So I'm starting off with it really small just to get a sense of where I want to be here. So let me quickly add in some little hills along. I get a top-down view here. So like it's already, I'd like to raise the size of my brush a little bit to get a little bit more going on at once. So I'll just add some interesting little features along the island so it's not quite so flat. I'll raise the size a little bit there. And again, please spend more time than what I'm doing here. Modify the brush size, modify the opacity, essentially play around with your own setting on your island to get it to look the way you like. Try out different brushes and things. We're just looking for some more realistic geography on the island, so some more places to sort of walk around for the player. Okay, well, it's not the most beautiful thing in the world. In addition to making little hills, remember that if you hold down the Shift key with your raise and lower terrain, that will lower the terrain down, so you can create little mini lakes or ponds on your island if you take the terrain way down, or you can just lower things down just a little bit. Okay, so please spend some time adding those hills and terrain items to your island, and again going from time to time and investigate to see how it looks. So it's looking pretty interesting. It's a little rugged, maybe more rugged than what I would like on here, but it certainly is more interesting than what it was and looks a bit more realistic in terms of an island. I might go and do a bit of weathering. So you can do weathering on your island by checking the the terrain height, the smooth height tool. Again, select whatever brush you want and various brush sizes and strength of the brush, and you can use that to smooth things out. So you see, if I zoom in a little bit, I've got these kind of rough looking hills, and I'm going to just smooth those out just a bit here. It's really smooth things out. Alright, so that looks pretty good. Now, the next thing I want to do is I'm going to create a path on my island that's going to take us from one side of the island all the way across the island and over to my outpost building. So in previous assignments we've had our player starting right in front of the outpost, but let's give them a little tour of the island first. So to do that, what I'd like to do is create a nice beach area that's on the opposite side of the island. And to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just zoom in a little bit over on the other side of the island. And I'm going to use my paint height tool. And I'm going to set my height down to, let's say, 12. And I'll choose a brush, a fairly large brush to start with. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a beach area over here. Now you can see that for me that 12's a little low, so maybe I'll raise it up a bit. Let's say 15. There we go. So this is going to create sort of a flat area that I'm going to call my beach on my island. And given that this is supposed to be a beach, I'm going to also paint it with some sand texture. So paint some sand on there. It's a little heavy on the sand, but I can use some other textures and change the target strength and the opacity setting and also the brush size and the brush style, and then maybe fade in some other little textures here as well. And I might also do some smoothing, height smoothing, so that my beach sort of runs down a little bit more smoothly into the ocean, and so that I don't have quite such a stark cliff between the beach and the other parts. So on your own, please do something similar. Just go around and start playing with the textures that you're going to have. You want to get in sort of close and take a look and see what they're going to look like and make modifications. It looks pretty good. Looks like a beach. So I've got a beach laid out on my island. Now what I want to do is I'm going to create a pathway that goes between this beach and the outpost over here. And to do that, I'll find a sort of a natural looking path that may already exist on the island, and if there isn't one, I'll create one. I'm going to set the height using my paint height so that it starts off roughly what the height is on my beach. In my case, it's 15. And then I'm going to start using that paint height tool, and I'll start to draw a path in my terrain that follows around. Maybe it swerves around a little bit. And from time to time, as I move from my beach closer to the outpost, which is at a higher elevation, I'm going to raise the height of that path a little bit. So I'm at 15. Maybe I'll raise it up just even one to 16 and continue on my way. I can zoom in real close so I can get a good view of what I'm doing. Carry the path along a little bit more. Carry it off through here. Maybe I'll raise the height a little bit more here to 17. And basically just continue to draw a path all the way around the island. Going right around my volcano. And let's raise that up here to 19. Draw back over that last section there. And we're getting close to the outpost. I'm going to raise it up to what its level is, which is 20. Okay, so I've got a path now that goes all the way across the island from my beach. In order to see that path, I'm going to paint on a texture along the pathway. I'm going to have to raise the strength quite a bit here, raise the opacity a bit, and start drawing that in there so that the user will be able to see where the path is. Draw it right along the island. I suspect you'll be a lot more careful in your drawing of your path than I'm being here, but I'm just doing the quick version of it. And take it right up to the outpost there. Now, remember that as I was drawing my path, I was also raising the height of the terrain. So as I walk this path, when I hit those places where the terrain jumps. Let me zoom in real close on one here. I'm going to want to smooth out that jump. Again, using the smooth height tool for the terrain. Each time I've got one of those little jumps in here, I'm going to grab it and I'm going to smooth it out just a bit. Yeah, that was actually probably a little bigger than I wanted. Okay, let's take that down. We'll reduce the size of that, and then you can see I can smooth it out that way. That way what will happen is that your player won't have to actually make jumps as they're moving along the path. They're going to be able to smoothly walk from spot to spot. So go all the way through your path, smoothing it out each time there's one of the jumps in elevation. You can see up ahead here there's quite a big jump here, so I'm going to need to smooth that out. And again, you're going to want to spend a lot more time than what I'm doing here to make it work and look just so. But let's say I'd spent lots of time already doing this. We've got the path going all the way around. It'd be good to give the user a sense that they'd reached the end of the path. Now the outpost itself does that, but we can use the design of the island itself to reinforce the sense that they have reached the end of their path, they've reached their destination. Using the raise and lower terrain tool, what I'll do is draw some little hills right around the outposts. It's sort of, oops, it's a little bigger than I want. They give a sense to the user that they've reached the goal here. So let's sort of lock them in essentially to the end of the path there. And again, you'll want to spend far more time than I'm doing. So we've got our path laid out. We need to next place our first-person controller at the beginning of that path. So select your first-person controller in the hierarchy, and then using your translate tool, drag that first-person controller over to the beach, remembering that you can use the F key to zoom in on it in the view, and then position it nicely onto the beach, and using the rotate tool, rotate the view around so that when the player starts they'll actually be looking at the beginning of the path. And then, as I've been suggesting all along, make sure to frequently hit play and go in and test your scene to see if it's looking like what you'd like. So I've got a path that goes along pretty well here. It's a little, I probably have walls that are a little steeper than what I would like, so I would probably want to redo those. And I can check, there's one of the jumps in elevation. It's smooth enough that it's not causing me to have to jump my way all the way around. And it's looking fairly natural, my island, in terms of the placement of those trees that I put in earlier. There aren't a lot of them. I want to add a few trees. Here's a little jump in elevation. It's fairly smooth. Here's an unusual little hunk left over. I'd probably want to get rid of that. It doesn't look very natural. And I'm continuing to climb my way around here and making my way toward the outpost. I can still see from the terrain, it's maybe a little more subtle even than I would like. I might change the texture on the trail, but aha! Here we go. I've reached a point at which it looks like I've reached the end of the trail, and there in front of me is my outpost. So that all looks pretty good. I'd probably spend some more time making it look even better, and I welcome you to do the same. The goal is to make your island look as realistic, if that's your goal, as possible. Once you've got all that set up the way you like, the next thing we're going to do is something that's really cool that Unity allows you to do. And that is to turn on fog so that you can create a more realistic feel to the atmosphere around you itself. Here's how you can turn on that fog. If you go up to Edit on the File menu and come down to Render Settings, and look over on the inspector, you'll see that the first item is simply called fog. And when you click that on, you're going to notice that now you've got fog off in the distance. You can also change the ambient light. This is the overall light that appears inside your world. I suggest for your island playing around with this a little bit. You don't want to make it too dark unless you're going for a nighttime view. But and you can change the color and so on. In my case, I'm going to make mine a fairly light gray for my ambient light. And I'm going to turn leave my fog on. I'll leave the default color as it is. But I might click on the color picker and change the alpha a bit to lower it down so the fog's not quite so thick, basically. I can see things through it more easily. And my fog is pretty dense right now, so I might lower that down a little bit as well. I invite you to play around, and the best way to get a sense for how thick the fog is to make settings to it and then hit play and then look. So actually I think my fog density is a little low there. I'd like it a bit higher than that, so I'll change it back up again. And now that's more like it. I can get a sense of fog off in the distance there. One other thing I want to change related to how it looks, the scene looks to the first-person player, is the clipping plane. This is how far the camera that's connected to my first-person controller can see. So in your hierarchy view, select the first-person controller and expand it out. And one of the child objects in the first-person controller is the main camera. If you click on that, you'll get a preview of what it's seeing, and you'll look in the inspector and notice that there is a section called clipping planes. I'm going to change the far clipping plane to 400. It's essentially 400 meters. Anything that's beyond 400 meters will not be seen by the camera. It won't be rendered. One use for this far clipping plane is to reduce the amount of processing that Unity needs to do in order to see what's ahead of you inside the scene, and this can reduce the complexity of the scene and help slower computers be able to run the scene at a higher frame rate. You can play around with a combination of the far clipping plane and the settings on the fog so that you could create a really dense fog so that you can't see that far ahead of you, and then you set the far clip plane to quite close so that so the fog is covering the fact that the camera isn't rendering much beyond where you're looking. Okay, so now we're really getting somewhere. There's one more thing I want to do, and it's another cool feature of Unity. I'd like to add some shadows to my scene. Now, in the professional version of Unity, you can have real-time shadows in your scene. In the free version, you can't, but you can bake shadows into your scene, which is a better way to go about adding shadows anyway, because it's much more efficient and requires less processing power. So let's set up our scene to bake some lights, to bake the shadows that we'd like to have on our scene. Here's how we're going to do that. First of all, we need to set up the existing models in our scene so that they're going to react to the directional light, the sun, that we have in our scene, and cast shadows, and then be able to be part of the calculations for our light mapping tool so that shadows will be baked into the scene from the objects we've placed into the scene. So to do that, what I'd like you to do first is come over to your project window and go down into the Book Assets Models folder and select your Outpost object. Then over in the inspector, we're going to click the box that says Generate Light Map UVs. This will make it so that the outpost is able to be used in our light mapping tool. Once you've selected that in the project window, then go down to the Apply button, click Apply, and then we're going to do that one more time with our generator object. Remember, we had a generator next to the outpost. So we're going to choose Generate Light Map UVs, and then choose Apply. If there are other objects that you've added to your scene, I know some of you have put in the coconut shed, and some of you put in the fire and so on, things that you'd like to show shadows, and you would do the same process for each of those. Now the first step is to make those changes in the project view. We also need to make changes to those objects in the scene itself. So in your hierarchy view, click on your outpost object there. And then we're going to go over and make sure that the static box is selected. And we're going to choose Yes, Change Children. Only static objects in a scene will work with the light baking tool in Unity. So I've set the outpost object to static, and I've set now I'm going to set the generator object to static as well, and choose Yes, Change Children. So now we're getting somewhere. Now another thing I want to do is I'm going to have a light inside my outpost, and I'd like to, when I have the player go into the outpost, I want them to be able to see, basically. So we're going to add a light in there. So I'm going to select the outpost object in my hierarchy view, and I'm going to expand it out. And then inside that outpost object, look for the lamp child object. And with that selected, click on click on the F key so that you can get in and see that light up close inside your outpost. Once you've got the lamp object selected in your hierarchy, I want you to go over to the inspector down to the section for the shader for that lamp. And I'd like you to click on the drop-down box and to choose the option Self-Illume Diffuse. You won't see it in this recording because it's far down in the drop-down box, but when you select that, you'll notice that it will show you in the preview here that now you're going to have a sort of a illuminated light itself. It won't be casting a light, but that object itself will have a light. Once I've selected that shader, I'm going to make sure that the main color of the shader is kind of a lightish yellow. I might go even lighter here. Okay. And I'm going to set the emission that we're going to use for the light mapper to 80. So set that to 80. Okay. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to actually create a light inside the outpost. So over in the hierarchy view, I'm going to choose Create and Point Light. And then I'm going to take that point light that I've just created, I'm going to drag it up and drop it onto the lamp child object, like so. And then that will become a child, that point light will become a child of the lamp object. With that point light selected in the hierarchy, I'm going to look over into the inspector to the transform area, and there is a little cog icon to the right of the name. I'm going to click that and choose Reset. What that will do is place that lamp at the origin point. It'll place the light at the origin point of the lamp object, which is not exactly where we want it to be. We'd actually like to be a little bit lower. So with that point light selected, come over again to the inspector, to the position area of the transform, and change the Z setting to -1. And you'll see in the scene view that's going to drop your light down a little bit. Last but not least, still with the point light selected, come over to the inspector and look down at the light mapping section. This will let us tell Unity to include this light we've got here into the light mapping calculations. So we're going to choose baked only. Okay, now we're really getting somewhere. Next thing I want to do is let's go over to our directional light in the hierarchy setting. And we need to set it up so that it's going to work appropriately with the light mapping tool. We need to click to make sure that it is static. And down in the light mapping section, just like we did with that last light, we need to choose baked only. All right, then let's open up our light mapping window now and begin to get things set up to do the actual baking of the lights. So if you go up to your window on the main menu and choose light mapping, it will open up a light mapping window. That's what I've got right here. I'm going to drag it up and place it over here so it's set in place. Now it's important to do what we're about to do with the directional light set or selected inside your hierarchy. Okay. Now looking over at the light mapping window, make sure you're in the object section. Come down to the section that says light mapping and choose baked only again. All right. And on the baked shadows section, we're going to choose on real-time soft shadows. And we'll leave all of the other settings as they are. Now we're going to choose the, let's see. Let's choose the bake setting. And the only thing we're going to change in this section is the resolution. The only thing we're going to set. So make sure it's set to 50. And then we're going to choose Bake Scene. Now when you do this, it's going to take Unity quite some time to bake the shadows into the scene. You'll see if you look down at the bottom of the window for Unity, there'll be a little blue bar that's telling you the progress of the light baking operation. While it's doing that, you can come out and be doing other things. So this is going to take some time to bake these lights. So I will skip that section in this recording and come back when the light baking operation is finished. Okay, so our light mapping bake has been finished. And if you take a look in the inspector, you're going to see now that at the bottom there's a preview section. If you don't see it, you can click to expand it out. And what you're going to notice now is that we've got a pair of light maps, one that's used when we're close to objects and one that's used when we're far away. Click play, and now you'll note as you walk around that you've got some really cool baked shadows on your island. So here I am at the beginning of my trail, and you'll see that now the trees have got shadows that are going across, and as I walk up my trail here, there's a shadow that's running from the hills around me. And I'll continue down the path and skip ahead so that I'm close to the outpost, and we'll see what it looks like there. Okay, here I am approaching my outpost, and again you'll notice we've got a much more realistic looking island after we've baked in our lights. We've got these great shadows coming from the hills. You can see our batteries here are not actually casting shadows because they're not static objects, so they weren't included in the baking. But you'll see if we could walk around the back of our outpost building that it was included in the calculations, and so now there's a shadow running across. And let's collect our power cells and go in and take a look at our inside of our outpost. Let me get closer here. And you'll see now I've got, ooh, it's quite bright actually. I'd probably want to tone that down a little bit. But you can see that we have a nice light here inside the outpost, and in fact it's been included in the light map baking so that we've got the light projected onto the table here and onto the walls around. Okay, so that's it for this lesson. Please play around with your own island and get it looking in tip-top shape. And we are nearly ready now between this lesson and the lesson on menus to submit the last Unity assignment, but there's one more step to do we're going to do in the next lesson before we submit that final lesson. So I'll see you next time.